Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. On today's episode, Kate Rigby joins us to discuss the intersection of autism and fibromyalgia and being an author for 40 years. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Kate, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd love to begin our conversation by learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
I'm 67 now, and it was a gradual realization after the age of 50. A few of my online friends and contacts mentioned they've been diagnosed or exploring a diagnosis kind of in the 20 teens. And one online friend who's also a writer mentioned her daughter had been diagnosed and that she had been too. I can't remember what age she was then, but she then asked me if I'd thought of going for a diagnosis. And I mean, that wasn't the first time I'd thought about it fleetingly, but then I kind of shelved the idea until this friend mentioned it. And so I re-looked at myself, as obviously she'd seen something in me, and I wasn't so different to her. So then a couple of other male friends or contacts online were also very late diagnosed. So I made a decision to pursue it, and I'd written it as a goal on one of my blogs at the beginning of 21, and by 2022, I was diagnosed with the support of my GP and something in we have something called right to choose in England. So there's a long waiting list, but you can go via another route. And one of my sisters was also diagnosed at the same time. So I was 63 then and she was 65. So yeah. Once we were diagnosed, everything kind of fell into place and made sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I've certainly talked to several people diagnosed around your age or older, but I don't know if I've talked to anyone around that age that their sibling also had a similar experience. What have been those conversations been like for the two of you?
Well, because we're very close and we live together, it was kind of made sense that I'd probably done the initial, they were kind of my online friends, but it made sense. She wanted to explore, and I said, "Oh, can we be diagnosed together?" And the GP referred us both, and the assessor who diagnosed the autism, we're both also ADHD, but the person who diagnosed the autism, we could choose whether to do a face to face or remote, and we wanted to do remote because it would have meant traveling. And he was happy to do that. He was happy to do us. And what he did was he did us kind of have separate interviews in the assessment, but also some together. And also we could corroborate, each other's, sometimes it's not essential, but they sometimes want you to have childhood, anecdotes or things that you did. And we could sort of say, well, remember when you, and, she could say, yeah, and you, sort of thing. Yeah.
So many of us as autistic people have co occurring conditions. From what I understand, fibromyalgia impacts you. What do you think it's important for people to know how fibromyalgia and your autism impact one another?
Fibromyalgia was one of the first uh, uh, physical or neurological. I don't, people classify it as differently, but it was one of the kind of non-mental health ones that I had was one of the first kind of non was the first kind of physical diagnosis. And it was interesting because my when I was diagnosed, my GP said that people with fibromyalgia process pain differently. And that kind of made sense. It was why, I found problems with medical procedures, and so many things were very difficult for instance, having my blood pressure taken, mammograms, smears, giving blood, all those things. Other people seem to say it was discomfort, but me, it was sometimes crying out, screaming pain, and so that kind of made sense with the again with the au with us as, having my later diagnosis as being autistic. I thought, gosh, yes, we also process pain and can feel things very intensely. And then I also had another diagnosis with, I don't know if you have the same in the US, but we have ME, which sometimes is known as chronic fatigue syndrome. And I was diagnosed with that 9 years after being diagnosed with fibromyalgia, but it often co-occurs with fibromyalgia, and now I understand it coexists with autism. And it was quite a light bulb moment for me when I first heard of autism burnout and how similar that is to ME. Because one of the defining symptoms of ME is something they call post-exertional malaise, which means, you have the delayed crash after exerting, whether it's physical, mental, social, emotional. You just, you just shut down or you just need to sleep. And we also, I don't know if you know about the spoons theory, but, we say we
Sure.
run out of
Sure.
spoons.
Sure.
And I have first heard that in relation to ME. And it was another light bulb moment when I saw people talking about autistic burnout and mice running out of spoons. And I thought, gosh, that's so interesting. It seems that these are very closely associated, these conditions. And yeah, I also have other conditions which I won't bore you with.
Oh, you definitely wouldn't bore me with that information, but and I don't think you're boring at all. I think you're a really talented writer who's written lots of novels as well as short stories. And, I think it's interesting because you've went through traditional publishing, small press publishing, and self-publishing. So kind of all the different avenues. So if we have writers listening to this conversation, what might be some things for them to consider when deciding maybe what publishing route for them to take?
Yeah, well, it's a different world now. When I was first traditionally published, I was that was the hardback was in 1988 and the paperback was 1990, and then I had a US hardback in 1990. But it's a different world now. So and I think I wrote in an area that's more niche, whereas I think it's very, very hard. It was always hard to get a publisher, but now I think in some ways it's even harder to get a traditional publisher. But people do if they write perhaps more in a popular or more commercial genre. I mean, at least these days you can look at websites and they'll tell you if there's submissions are open. I mean, in the good old days, you just post off your sample chapters of your novel with return postage and leave it in the lap of the gods. But I mean, then I was published by a smaller press, and they did have more opportunities. But again, we're looking back to the noughties, and again, it's changed massively since then. And they often publish fewer books and struggle with marketing. So that's when I embraced self-publishing because I thought, well, you know, I probably will sell just as many as I did when I had a small press, and that's exactly what I've done. So I mean, I in about 2011, I decided to started uploading my books for Amazon and did the back gradually put my backlist on there. Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing is it's completely free if you have your own cover and you've used beta readers for proofreading and editing. Although obviously some people want to go off and pay for that, so that would be the costs if you needed that sort of, but it's not essential. But I suppose the main problem is invisibility because there's so many thousands of people doing it, and it's got harder and harder. I mean, I think, people are saying now Amazon are having people write their books totally by AI, and it's just, it's soul destroying, really. I mean, I'm I'm not against AI as a tool, but not as a generative, and anyway, I would say if you're looking to make money, you better you're not gonna very few people will make it, but and of course, you need to beware vanity publishing. There's so many predators out there wanting you to pay for, and they will say, "Oh, your book's really marvelous," and then I mean, there's a latest scam going around now that they email you and they say, "Oh, we want to have your book on our author's spotlight," and they're all scams, and they don't tell you straight away that they want money. And when I got the first one, and I'm quite an old hand in this, I always fell for it, and I thought, "Oh, great, somebody's interested." But there's hundreds of them now, and I think they're all AI generated, and yeah, I mean, it is a bit soul destroying, but there's also good communities online, supportive communities who will tell you all about scams, and you can share the scams and, and share good tips and things like that. Yeah.
Talking about supportive communities, you're part of the Chasing Driftwood Indie Collective, which helps marginalized authors realize their publishing dream, not only affordably, but within a supportive network of peers. So, since you've been an author for 40 years now, I'm wondering what have been some of the things or maybe support from others in your life that have been helpful in your journey just to kind of keep on going?
Yeah, I mean, getting, as I say, getting together. I mean, Chase with Driftwood, I've probably been in that. I don't know whether I lose track of time, whether it's 4 years, 5 years, but yeah, I mean, that's be getting together with other like-minded authors is always a bonus. I mean, we we sort of have, you know, we don't always have, we haven't read all each other's books in the collective, but there's some people's books that you'll be drawn to, but we've read and reviewed and sometimes reviewed and shared each other's. And, sometimes we've had sort of seasonal promotions like, a summer promotion the founding member will say, oh, one of the founding members or both of them will have said, have you got anything for, February, Valentine or a romantic one or yes, and Halloween and October one. So we did that. I don't think that was last year, that was the year before. But it was the brainchild of someone called Chantel Atkins, who I'd already connected with online. And, we love each other's work. And another author is Miriam Hastings, who I kind of knew before, and she's an author who I really like. And there's Sima Alex Sansford, who is another founding member. So yes, I think the online community can be very supportive, and the people who support you once will support you again and again. And it also helps to be mutually supportive. But obviously, you don't want to say, oh, I'm going to review you because you reviewed mine. Sometimes you just gravitate to people whose work uh, kind of resonates with your own. And I mean, yes, I I did start off a Facebook group as well for autistic authors and readers and their allies, and it's books are our special interest, but we're only a very small number, but that's good because to try and get people to engage. I mean, it's very slow because people. It's the same with all groups. I find that people often want to just promote, and it's very hard to get people to sort of interact with each other. But there are a few people who do, and they're very supportive, and that's it. I think tends those sort of groups tend to grow very organically and very slowly, and rather than the whole number of people all interacting as you'd hoped, when you set it up.
Absolutely. And as artistic people, I think, finding systems that specifically work for us is really critical. I mention this because with the amount of writing you've done over the years, you must have had some sort of system to make this happen, whether it's maybe conscious or unconscious. I don't know. What does the system look like for you in order to complete so many works of literature? Because if I write if I do writing, like one page of writing, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, you have to have the hyper focused special interest. But yes, I mean, I think actually I did make notes and I forgot to remember this, but I've just remembered that the person who inspired me to write a novel in the first place was my mum. She was writing a novel when I was in my teens, and I picked her brains to start with, and it didn't become such a difficult achievement because she was writing a novel and I wanted to write something. So she was going along to writing classes. I would pick her brains. I'm not saying that's how I evolved my own system, but that got me, used to writing and work, doing a book. It didn't become such a kind of unachievable thing to write a novel. Whereas for a lot of people think, oh, I remember people saying in those days, people would say, you're not writing, it's older people who write novels. I was only 19 and I'd started to write a novel. But I mean, nowadays, younger people do as well. But yeah, I suppose I've just evolved my own system go along. I've always been told that I'm not much of a plotter. Mm, But sometimes you get these when you do author interviews online, they say, "Are you a plotter or a pantster?" Which is like I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a pantster is somebody who flies by the seat of their pants, so they don't. And I always say I'm a plotster. I do a little bit of plotting, but I think I do a lot of flying, but I couldn't completely fly by the seat of my pants. I'm not a complete pantster because um, I do have a vague outline and then I kind of evolve it as I go along. But I've got so many notebooks and so many um, ideas that I'm never short. So there's always a backlog. It's just a question of time often of getting them together and the older you get, the more years that go by, the more you've accumulated, and you think, where do I, I just trying to sort through the ideas sometimes, and ideas can sometimes jump the queue. You think, yes, I want to do this now, and that one can wait till sometime in the future. And yeah, I suppose being ADHD, I think the autist in me is more organized and does like an element of organization, whereas the other thing and let it evolve as I go along. So I do like to have some shape and idea before beginning a book, even if it doesn't stay that way. But I rely on my notes and ideas to sort of fill in the color in the blanks. I sometimes described it a bit like sewing a patchwork quilt together. You've got bits here and there, and you've got to try and put it together. But I don't have a rigid system. So I think character driven is the thing that has always inspired me to write rather than plot driven. So I might have characters to write about, and then the story will can sort of fit around the characters if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense. When a story that doesn't have characters that I find to that I can believe and feel like they're authentic, I just my brain just goes somewhere else.
That's exactly it. I mean, they could have a brilliant plot, but if the characters are wooden, I'm not. Yeah, but then, but I think the ideal is to have both, to have great characters and a good plot. And I think I'm weak on plot, and I think that's my executive function challenges. But I'm probably not as weak as I think I am. But I know because the genre of literary fiction, which is more character driven and form, doesn't need to be very rigidly plot driven. And I quite like that kind of novel, but a lot of people don't. They want it to be, we don't want to hear about long descriptions or, streams of consciousness. They just want, dum, 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 dum. So, yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you about some of your writing that started out as a series of blogs. It's called A Little Guide to Pet Peeves from an Artist's Perspectives. There are some great pet peeves in there. I was reading some of it, but I'm wondering if you have any new pet peeves from an artist's perspective since you completed this book that started out as a series of blogs.
Well, I think I added the newer ones into the book because the blogs were I kind of did during COVID. And so by the time I got to write it as a sort of ebook, I had added I've made lots of notes, and I thought I need to update this, and COVID's different now, and I need to rewrite it. So particularly a lot of the sayings, the annoying sayings. That I think that was the raison d'être for doing it was annoying sayings that people say. And I remember discussing this with another autistic friend. We send voice notes to each other, and we were discussing various foods and drinks in voice notes. And I thought, oh, I forgot to put them in. So I edited the one. And so I did, that was more of a recent one. I thought I forgot to mention herbal teas that have hibiscus. I can't stand them, the ones that go all red and they taste, and beetroot. I thought, oh yes, I don't like beetroot. No. And we were also discussing sayings that give us the ick. And she said that was one of hers. So I said, it's not one of mine particularly, but we both agreed on it is what it is. Just say it all the time. And I did think of one actually when people say, oh, go and look it up on Google. Like they just say, oh, go and look it up. It's annoying, and it also sounds like a demand, like, so demand a voice. And somebody says, go and look it up. I think, no, I won't. Oh, yeah. But I wanted to do quite light-hearted things. I didn't include phobias because, bigger things like wasps and rats and, they're kind of more, yeah, kind of, they're more phobias, I think. So I kind of tried to make a distinction, although I didn't write about sort of pet peeve. I also want to do pet passions, actually, things that I really, really love.
Is that a long list?
Well, it's funny. I did make a list of pet passions, and it kind of seemed to be going into a poem more than a. I just thought, oh, can I be bothered writing it all the things out. So I just thought, oh, I could just do a shorter one for that. Yeah. 'Cause it was quite a long list, yes, but particularly around food and things like that came to mind. And of course, there's so many music and songs. I mean, I didn't include pet peeves. I didn't even include songs actually. So there's probably a lot of songs that would be pet peeves. My mind goes a blank. I'd have to think of it in it. I think, oh yeah, yeah, that's a real song that annoys me.
And lastly, Kate, how can our listeners learn more about and purchase your books?
I Probably difficult to give links here, isn't it? So, I mean, I have a website which is if KJR Books, it's just if they just write KJR Books, that should come up. And I do have a blog called Orphistic Words, it's on Google Blogger. I have a Facebook page, and oh yes, you could find me on Amazon if you just look up Kate Rigby. There is another Kate Rigby though, who's an author. They've conflated some of her books, but they're all the ones about sociological and environmental things. They're not me. But I think my first book was probably published before this other Kate Rigby came along, and then I published some more. So yes, it's all, and of course these sites. I've tried to tell them, no, this is a different Kate Rigby, but I've given up. So
And we'll include your website in the show notes and the description of the episode and all that, so
yeah.
people can learn about all of your wonderful writing. Well, Kate, it was truly a pleasure to talk with you today. Thanks so much for
You
having
know,
this conversation.
it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Doug. I've enjoyed it, and it's flown by.
Thanks so much to Kate for the conversation. To learn more about Kate and her writing, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you after listening to this episode on how can people distinguish between autistic burnout, chronic illness, and the ways those experiences may overlap. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.